The millionaire's son rejected all the nannies, except this maid. Ethan Walker's office looked like a battlefield. Architectural blueprints were scattered across the floor, crumpled notes piled in corners, and amid the chaos stood a laptop with a cracked screen reflecting the exhausted face of a man once hailed as one of California's most brilliant architects. Outside, rain drizzled against the glass window. The wind's howl blended with the desperate cries of Noah, his 10-month-old son. That heart-wrenching sound had become the house's constant background music since Laura, his wife, had died in an accident. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, pinching the bridge of his nose, trying to chase away the throbbing pain in his head. In 12 months, 14 nannies had come and gone. None lasted more than 2 weeks. Some fled in fear, others ended up in the hospital, scratched, bitten, or trembling from panic they couldn't explain. The little boy sat on the floor, face flushed from crying, his wide amber eyes locked on his father like a lost soul clinging to the last piece of the world. Ethan crouched down and looked into his son's eyes. Suddenly, the child stopped crying. He stared back, deep, searching, as if trying to find something hidden inside his father. For a brief second, a shiver ran down Ethan's spine. That gaze didn't belong to a baby. It reflected all the pain, emptiness, and guilt he'd buried inside himself. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He had said those words every night, every morning, but nothing ever changed. He reached for the wedding photo on his desk. Laura was smiling brightly, one hand resting on her belly. She had been pregnant with Noah then. The memory hit him like a wave of guilt. He should have driven that day. He should have been with her. A loud thud broke the silence. Noah had thrown his stuffed bear to the floor and screamed. Startled, Ethan dropped the photo. The glass shattered. He clutched his head, gasping, muttering under his breath, "Please, don't make it worse." The more he tried to hold back his tears, the harder the boy cried. Lightning flashed through the window, lighting up the room in a blinding instant. Ethan closed his eyes, part in fear, part in exhaustion. "Laura, I don't know what to do anymore," he murmured into the darkness. There was no answer, only the rain, and the child's cries echoing through the room, relentless, like a plea for help that no one could understand. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving trails of water running down the windows like marks of time that hadn't yet dried. The house on the hill was eerily quiet. Ethan sat in his study, dark circles under his eyes from a sleepless night, listening to the faint, raspy breathing of Noah in the next room. The boy had just fallen asleep after crying for hours. Then the doorbell rang, shattering the silence. Ethan frowned. From the security camera by the gate, he saw a young woman standing under the porch, holding an old canvas backpack. Her brown hair was tousled by the wind, yet her eyes were bright and steady. Ethan opened the door. Before him stood a woman of about 28, dressed simply in a white shirt and dark jeans. Her voice was soft and calm. "Good morning, Mr. Walker. My name is Sofia Bennett. I came about the housekeeping job. I saw your ad in the paper." Ethan frowned deeper. "Housekeeping job? I didn't post any ad." Sofia looked momentarily confused. She reached into her bag and pulled out a neatly cut newspaper clipping. "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have the wrong address." But before Ethan could say another word, a small sound came from behind him. Noah. The boy had woken up, perhaps startled by the unfamiliar voice. Ethan turned around, bracing himself for another outburst. But what happened next was something he could never have imagined. When Sofia leaned slightly to peek inside, Noah stopped crying. His eyes, usually filled with fear and anger, widened, focusing intently on the stranger. And then, suddenly, a smile appeared on his little face. A real smile. A whole, radiant smile. The first since Laura's death. Ethan froze. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. For a year, everyone had been rejected by this child. Yet, with just one glance, Sofia had changed everything. "Hello there, sweet boy," Sofia said softly, her voice as gentle as a breeze. She knelt down and extended a finger toward him. Without fear, the baby grasped her finger, his tiny hand curling around it as he made joyful, babbling sounds. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He had never seen his son so calm. No spasms, no screaming, just laughter, as if a miracle had been released into a house once haunted by cries. "I can't believe this," Ethan whispered. Sofia looked up, her eyes warm and serene. "I'm sorry, I should probably go now," she said, turning to leave. "Wait," Ethan said after a moment of silence. "Try working here for just 1 week. If it goes well, we'll talk further." Sofia lowered her head slightly in gratitude. "When could I start?" she asked, a trace of shyness in her voice. "If you don't mind," Ethan replied quietly, "you can start right now." At that moment, Madeline Carter, Laura's sister, arrived to visit her nephew. Madeline gave Sofia a quick, assessing look before speaking. "Who's this woman?" she asked. Ethan replied calmly, "The new housekeeper. Come on, everyone, let's go inside." More than 2 hours had passed. Ethan Walker still stood motionless by the wide glass window where the afternoon sunlight slanted in delicate golden streaks across the wooden floor. Below, Sofia Bennett was kneeling, carefully picking up the shards of glass from the broken laptop screen. She didn't complain, didn't rush. She simply hummed a lullaby, her voice soft as a breath, gentle enough to fill the once cold room with unexpected warmth. And the most unbelievable thing was this. Noah, the boy who had never let anyone hold him, who never stayed quiet for more than a minute, was now sitting calmly beside her, stacking colorful wooden blocks with his tiny hands. Ethan exhaled slowly, astonishment flickering in his eyes. "I can't believe it. In just 2 hours, she's done what 14 certified professionals couldn't." Behind him, Madeline Carter, his late wife's sister, stood with her arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe, her gaze sharp as a blade. Her voice was quiet, but cold. "You should be careful, Ethan. The people who make you feel safe too quickly are often the most dangerous." Ethan didn't reply. He walked slowly toward Sofia, the sound of his shoes soft against the wooden floor. "Miss Bennett," he said in a low voice, "I truly want to know. How did you manage to calm him like that?" Sofia looked up. In the tender light, her brown eyes gleamed with a honey warmth, deep, gentle, and disarmingly sincere. She smiled. "I didn't do anything, sir. The boy was already good by nature." She brushed a lock of hair from Noah's forehead, her voice steady and warm, like a quiet prayer. "Children are transparent mirrors. They reflect the fear, haste, and loneliness of adults. When the person caring for them trembles, they grow frightened. But if we truly look at them with a calm heart, they sense it, and become calm too." Ethan gazed at her, and for the first time in years, he felt as though he had just heard something real. "Do you have children?" Ethan asked. Sofia's smile faded slightly. She nodded softly. "I have a little girl. She stays with my mother while I'm working." "And what about the child's father?" Madeline suddenly interrupted, her voice sharp as a knife. Ethan frowned. Sofia straightened up, her expression shifting, no longer gentle, but cold and firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said quietly, "but I believe I have the right not to answer that question." The air in the room grew heavy, tense, and silent. At that moment, Noah let out a faint whimper. Sofia immediately bent down and lifted him into her arms. The movement was so gentle, so natural, that Ethan froze in astonishment. "He's hungry," she said softly. "May I use your kitchen?" At the end of the hallway, Ethan replied. But he's never eaten with anyone, not even with me. You never know until you try, Sofia interrupted with a small smile, then walked away. The kitchen gleamed with cold, polished steel. Perfect, sterile, lifeless, like everything else in the Walker mansion. Yet only a few minutes after Sofia entered, it seemed to come alive, as though the house itself had started to breathe again. She prepared the milk with slow, careful movements, speaking to Noah as she worked, her voice flowing like a story being told. Ethan stood in the doorway, afraid to move. The scene before him felt almost sacred. Then Sofia sat down, placed the baby on her lap, and offered him the bottle. Noah began to drink quietly, peacefully, his tiny fingers wrapped tightly around her hand, as if holding on to safety itself. Ethan felt as though someone had just opened a door that had been locked inside his heart for months. He stepped closer, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Miss Bennett? How do you do that?" Sofia looked up, her brown eyes glowing with gentle warmth. "I'm just explaining to him what I'm doing, sir," she replied softly. Ethan frowned. "My wife used to say the same thing." He paused, a shadow of sorrow crossing his face at the mention of Laura, but Sofia only smiled tenderly. "She must have been a wonderful woman." "She was the light of my life," Ethan said, his voice tightening. "After the accident, Noah became difficult, uncooperative, impossible to handle." Sofia looked at him with eyes full of empathy and quiet understanding. "Children feel their parents' pain, sir," she said softly. Her words cut like a blade, gentle but deep. Ethan fell silent for a long moment. For the first time, he realized that perhaps the cause of it all wasn't Noah, but himself. After finishing his bottle, Noah drifted into sleep. Ethan showed Sofia to the boy's room. Standing at the doorway, he watched as she gently laid his son down on the bed and pulled the blanket over him with the utmost care. When she turned back, Ethan spoke firmly, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "From now on, this job is yours. I'll pay you $10,000 a month. Please, take good care of my son." Tears welled up in Sofia's eyes and spilled down her cheeks. "Sir, you have no idea what this means to me, and to my daughter." "I think I do," Ethan replied quietly. Just then, Madeline appeared, her voice rising sharply. "Are you out of your mind, Ethan? How can you hire her when you know nothing about her?" Ethan ignored her, his eyes still on Sofia. "You'll start tomorrow," he said calmly. A week later, the house on the hill, once filled with endless cries, now echoed with laughter. In the early morning, sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows, spilling across the wooden floor where Noah crawled around, giggling as he chased a colorful fabric ball. From the kitchen came the smell of freshly baked bread. Sofia Bennett's soft humming floated through the air like a distant melody, awakening every quiet corner of the house. Ethan stood in the doorway, a cup of coffee in his hand, silently watching. He had never seen his son laugh for so long, no screaming, no desperate clinging, just pure, innocent joy, as simple and bright as the sunlight filtering through the curtains. "Look, Noah," Sofia said sweetly, her voice warm as honey. "Here's your little bear, and here's the magic ball. Which one will you choose?" Noah giggled, clapping his tiny hands and pointing at the ball. He threw it toward Sofia, then crawled over and wrapped his arms around her legs. The sight made Ethan's heart tighten. It was both heartwarming and strangely unfamiliar. Sofia looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I'm sorry. Did I wake you?" Ethan shook his head with a faint smile. "No, I'm not used to seeing my house this happy." They both laughed. It was a brief moment, but for Ethan, it felt like breathing again after months of suffocating silence. Since Sofia's arrival, the house had changed bit by bit. She cleaned out the old clutter, hung a few watercolor paintings she'd painted herself, baked bread, and every evening sang Noah to sleep with a voice as soft as the wind. Ethan had started working again. He was designing a new building, and for the first time in months, inspiration had returned. One afternoon, as golden sunlight streamed through the window, Sofia sat sewing Noah's torn stuffed bear. Ethan approached and sat across from her. "You have such skillful hands," he said. "I used to be a kindergarten teacher," she smiled. "I'm used to making toys for children." He looked surprised. "A teacher? Then why are you doing this kind of work?" Sofia fell silent for a moment. A quiet sadness shimmered in her eyes. "Because life doesn't always go according to plan," she said softly. "I used to teach at a small school, but after my son passed away, I couldn't go back to the classroom anymore." Ethan froze. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." She nodded gently. "His name was Oliver. He died when he was only 3 months old, sudden infant death syndrome. At that time, I thought I would never be able to love another child again." She glanced toward Noah, who was sleeping in his crib, a small smile playing on his lips. "But then I met your son, and I realized that sometimes the universe gives us another chance to heal." Her words left Ethan speechless. He just looked at her, in that soft golden light, her brown hair falling over her shoulders, her half-sad, half-warm smile. "I lost someone too," he said quietly. "Laura, my wife. She was an artist. This house was our design together. After she died, everything in it lost its meaning." "She must have been an incredible woman," Sofia said sincerely. Ethan nodded. "She was the light of my life, and when she was gone, I thought I'd never find that light again." A deep silence filled the room, broken only by the whisper of wind through the curtains. Then Sofia spoke softly, as if afraid to disturb the moment. "Maybe light doesn't disappear, Ethan. It just moves somewhere else, waiting for you to see it." Those words, simple yet profound, etched themselves into his heart like a quiet awakening. That afternoon, as Sofia sang Noah to sleep, Ethan stood outside the nursery door, listening. "Sleep, little star, the world is kind again." Her voice, like a breath of life, floated through the walls and shadows, reaching the deepest part of his soul. In that moment, Ethan understood. Peace had returned, not only for his son, but for himself. He didn't know where these feelings would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. From the day Sofia walked in, the light had truly returned to his home. On the 10th morning since Sofia arrived, the Walker house seemed completely reborn. Every little corner gleamed with light, soft music floated through the hallways. Ethan rarely left his desk without a smile now. And Noah, he was like a different child, calm, cheerful, sleeping peacefully. But not everyone in that house was happy. From the second-floor balcony, Madeline Carter quietly watched the scene below. Sofia holding Noah, showing him each blooming rose in the garden. That seemingly harmless image made Madeline grip the railing until her knuckles turned white. "So fast," she muttered. "Less than 2 weeks, and she's already taken everything." That evening, while Ethan sat in his study reviewing new blueprints, Madeline walked in, holding a glass of wine. "You seem busy." "Work's going well," Ethan replied, eyes still fixed on the screen. Madeline circled the desk, her voice gentle but calculating. "Quite surprising, isn't it? All this progress thanks to one maid. She really does have a kind of magic, doesn't she?" "She's good with Noah," Ethan said. "The boy needs that." "Good?" Madeline's lips curved. "Or is it you who needs her?" Ethan looked up, cautious. Madeline smiled, set her glass on the table, and leaned closer. "I'm just saying, be careful. Women like her always know how to make men trust them. But you don't really know anything about her past, do you? Ethan exhaled, keeping his composure. Madeline, I know you care about Noah, but Sofia isn't what you think. Oh, really? Madeline sneered. You're sure about that? She turned and walked away, leaving behind a trail of sharp perfume that clung to the air. When the door closed, Ethan leaned back in his chair, unease and frustration rising inside him. That night, in her room, Madeline opened her laptop. The screen's glow reflected off her cold, determined face. She pulled up a financial file, a detailed breakdown of Ethan's assets, including Laura's massive inheritance. A message popped up on the phone beside her. Private investigator. I've some information about Sofia Bennett. Madeline. Send everything. I want to know it all. She leaned back in her chair, sipped her wine, and a satisfied glint flickered in her eyes. Her plan had only just begun, and by the next afternoon, she was ready to strike. The next afternoon, Madeline arrived at the mansion and went straight to Ethan's office, a stack of papers clutched in her manicured hand. Take a look, she said, her voice sharp as glass. I've done some digging on Sofia, the woman you trust so blindly. He hesitated for a moment, then opened the folder. Inside was a copy of a police record. The paper clearly stated, Sofia Bennett, arrested for theft at a grocery store, 2019. Charge, stealing asthma medication for a child. Ethan sat in silence, each word cut like a knife. She, the woman who had brought laughter back into this house, had such a past. He said nothing, just stared at the papers in front of him. Finally, he folded them and spoke quietly. I need time to verify this. Of course, Madeline replied, her smile thin as a thread. But remember, she has a daughter, and desperate mothers are always a dangerous kind. The next morning, as Sofia was feeding Noah his porridge, Ethan walked in. There was a distance in his eyes, a quiet ache that made her chest tighten. Sofia, I need to talk to you. She set the spoon down and nodded. He placed an envelope in front of her, the same folder of documents. I need to hear this from you. Is it all true? Sofia looked at the papers, feeling her heart clench in pain. I didn't steal, she whispered. My daughter Emily had severe asthma. At that time, I was unemployed. The pharmacy refused to let me buy on credit. I only took one inhaler for her. They arrested me, but they released me as soon as they understood the situation. Ethan stayed silent for a long time. Inside him, two forces tore at each other, trust and doubt. He looked at Sofia's face, her tearful eyes, her trembling hands, and part of him wanted to believe her. But the papers lay there still, cold and sharp, slicing through his certainty. I need time, Ethan said softly. You don't believe me, do you? I don't know anymore. Sofia rose to her feet, tears falling, her voice unsteady. I've already lost one child. I won't lose another chance to live an honest life. But if you think I'm a liar, I'll go. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan behind, and little Noah staring after her, his wide blue eyes filled with the wordless fear of a separation he somehow already felt. 3 days after Sofia Bennett left the seaside mansion, the Walker house sank once again into that terrifying stillness. Not the calm of peace, but the silence of a storm waiting to break. The wide hallways were cold as ice. The wind moaned through the windows like the sighs of a lost soul. And Noah, the little boy who once laughed so brightly in Sofia's arms, had returned to his primal fear. He refused to eat, refused to sleep. Whenever he saw his father, he would only scream, hitting his head against the wall until it bled. Ethan held his son tightly, his voice breaking, trembling in the room bathed in the harsh white glow of the lamp. God, Noah, what do you want? I'm here, son. But the boy didn't hear. Amid sobs and hiccups, Noah repeated a single name, weak as a breath. Sofia. Her name. Just 2 syllables. Yet they shattered Ethan completely. He knew, no matter how hard he tried to deny it, he knew. He was the one who drove away the only person who had made his son smile. Madeline Carter, his late wife's sister, placed a hand on his shoulder, her tone soft with feigned concern. "See, Ethan? The child's just reacting out of habit. Give it a few more days. I'll call a psychologist. Don't worry too much." Ethan didn't answer. That night, when Madeline was asleep, he stayed awake. In the nursery, he sat in the armchair, holding Noah close against his chest. The boy's breathing was shallow, his small face flushed with fever, his little hands clutching the piece of fabric Sofia used to wrap around his neck. Ethan bowed his head, kissed his son's hair, and his voice cracked in the darkness. "You miss her so much, don't you, Noah?" The child didn't reply. He only burrowed deeper into his father's chest and whispered a single, chilling word. Ma. That fragile, trembling sound sliced through the man's heart, a heart that had forgotten how to cry. The next morning, Ethan went to the office. He had barely set his briefcase down when his secretary approached with a brown envelope. "Mr. Walker, this arrived early this morning. No sender's name." He opened it. Inside was a copy of Laura Walker's life insurance policy. The listed beneficiary wasn't him. It was Madeline Carter. The room seemed to tilt. The paper shook in his hands, the signature at the bottom, the handwriting he knew better than anyone's. "This can't be," he whispered. "I'm the only one on the original record." The amendment date, 1 week after Laura's death. A chill ran down his spine. A chain of images flashed through his mind. The accident, the car skidding on wet asphalt. His chest constricted. That night, Ethan drove out of the city. He went to the rundown boarding house Sofia had once mentioned, a small place with peeling walls, rusted gates, and a flickering yellow light shining over damp concrete steps. An elderly landlady opened the door, eyeing him warily. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do you know Sofia Bennett?" The woman sighed. "She left with her daughter 4 days ago. Said her employer didn't trust her. Thought she was a thief. Poor thing. I've lived here 10 years and never saw her do a single wrong thing." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "Do you know where she went?" "I'm afraid I don't," the woman said gently. Ethan clenched his fists, his breath unsteady. When he returned to the mansion, it was almost midnight. The entire house reeked of antiseptic. Noah lay on the bed, his face flushed with fever. Beside him, Madeline was holding a cold towel, her voice syrupy but false. "The doctor said it's just a viral fever, but look at him. He keeps calling her name. It's like he's haunted." Ethan looked at his son, then slowly turned toward Madeline. His eyes were no longer angry. They were cold enough to freeze the air. "How many times have you lied to me, Madeline?" She flinched. "What are you talking about?" "You altered Laura's insurance policy?" "What? Ethan, that's—" "Stop acting," he cut her off, his tone like a blade. Madeline stepped back, her face draining of color, her lips trembling. You have no proof." Ethan stared straight into her eyes. He looked exhausted, but in that exhaustion burned a new kind of light, the light of a man who had finally seen the truth. Ethan took a step forward, his voice breaking. "You cut Laura's brakes. You knew that could kill her." Madeline let out a distorted laugh. "If you knew Laura begged me for forgiveness before she died, would you still pity her?" "You're insane!" Ethan shouted. "Insane?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "All because you never loved me. If I can't have you, then no one will." Her cry was wild, desperate, like a cornered animal. She pulled a small gun from her pocket and aimed it straight at Ethan. A deafening gunshot shattered the air. The bullet grazed his shoulder, blood soaking through his shirt. Noah screamed in terror. Madeline staggered back, panic flooding her face as the wail of sirens grew closer. Before she could fire again, the police burst through the door. Mrs. Green, the neighbor, had called them after hearing the shot. Madeline was restrained, sobbing hysterically. "Everything was supposed to be mine! Mine!" Ethan shook his head slowly, blood still dripping from his wound. His voice was soft, sorrowful, almost a whisper. "Love never kills, Madeline. It saves. What you did was nothing but destruction." Madeline collapsed to her knees, her hands trembling, her eyes hollow and lost. The officers handcuffed her and led her away as the flashing red and blue lights of dawn filled the room. She turned her head one last time, murmuring in a fading voice, like wind dissolving into fog. "If Laura hadn't come into your life, maybe I would have been the one you loved." The door closed. Silence returned. Ethan sank into a chair, clutching Noah, the child trembling in his arms, sobbing softly. Blood still seeped from his shoulder, but he didn't care. The first light of morning streamed through the curtains, casting a gentle glow over his son's face, small, pure, innocent, untouched by darkness. He kissed the boy's forehead and whispered, "It's over now, son." But inside, another ache stirred. Sofia, the woman who had been slandered, doubted, driven away, the only one who had truly saved his child. Ethan stood, determination burning through the pain. "I'll find her," he vowed. "Even if I have to cross the world, I'll bring her back." 3 days later, the police concluded their investigation. Madeline Carter was sentenced to life in prison on charges of murder, embezzlement, and forgery. The media called it the tragic high society case of California, but for Ethan, it was simply the closing of a dark and painful chapter. That morning, dew still lingered in the air. Ethan Walker drove out of the city toward Sonoma, the place Sofia had once mentioned softly when she spoke of her humble but peaceful childhood among the vineyards. The suburban road stretched through the mist. On both sides, the dry fields shimmered faintly under the pale gold of dawn. Ethan slowed the car, his heartbeat uneven, his chest a tangled storm of guilt, regret, and a fragile, breathless hope. He stopped before a small wooden house with a slanted roof and thin smoke rising gently into the cold air. A soft melody drifted from inside, a woman's voice, low and warm like a breeze from memory. "Sleep, my child. The sun has set." Ethan froze. It was the lullaby he had heard 100 times in the Walker mansion, the song that had stopped his son's crying and taught him for the first time what peace sounded like. He pushed the wooden door open quietly. Inside the small room, Sofia Bennett sat by the window, holding little Lily in her arms. The morning light touched her face. Thinner, paler now, but still carrying that familiar, gentle glow. When she saw him, she froze. Mr. Walker?" Her voice trembled, a mix of surprise and fear. Ethan stopped a few steps away. For a moment, he didn't know how to begin. All the apologies he had rehearsed vanished from his throat. Finally, he spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sofia, I was wrong. I trusted the wrong person, and because of that, I made you and your daughter suffer." Sofia clutched Lily closer, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You owe me nothing, Mr. Walker." "No," Ethan shook his head, his voice breaking. "I owe you everything. My son's life, the light that returned to that house. They were all because of you." He took a step closer, then sank to his knees before her, something he had never done for anyone in his life. "Please, come back, not for me, but for Noah. He needs you." Sofia was silent for a long time. Her eyes shimmered between fear and tears. "If I return, what will people say?" she whispered. They'll say I'm taking advantage of you, that a maid is trying to climb above her place." From behind them came a calm, steady voice. "Let them talk, my dear." Ethan turned around. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, her silver hair neatly pinned, a worn wool shawl draped over her shoulders. Her name was Rosa, Sofia's mother. Her eyes were kind yet sharp, as though she could see straight into both their hearts. She stepped forward, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Sofia, I've watched you suffer for years, but some people are sent by God not to hurt us, but to teach us how to forgive. If your heart still knows how to love, don't fear what others will say. We live to be happy, not to be accepted." Tears streamed down Sofia's cheeks, falling onto her mother's hand. She whispered, "But what if I make a mistake again, Mama?" Rosa smiled gently. "When you love with all your heart, my child, there is no mistake." The room fell utterly still, only the sound of a soft breeze and Lily's quiet giggle in her mother's arms. Sofia turned to Ethan. In his eyes, she no longer saw a wealthy man, but a human being stripped bare, full of remorse, longing, and the will to make things right. Her voice trembled like the faint note of a violin string. "All right, but I have one condition." Ethan held his breath. "Anything." "Promise me," she said softly, "that you'll learn to trust me." Ethan took her hand, his eyes glistening in the golden light of dawn. "I promise." That afternoon, Ethan's car left Sonoma, carrying 3 passengers, himself, Sofia, and little Lily. From the porch, Mrs. Rosa stood watching as the car slowly disappeared into the mist. Her lips moved in a quiet prayer. "Please, let my daughter find true happiness." Behind them, the past faded away into the morning haze. Ahead of them, a new beginning unfolded, not dazzling, but real and tender, like the first light of dawn over the vineyards of Sonoma.